This is Levi Turner, a Senior Enterprise Architect with Qlik, and today we will be reviewing how to programmatically remove unused private sheets. So the question comes to mind of why we'd want to do this. So for many Qlik deployments over time, there will be a growth of private sheets on published applications. So these are created by users for self-service purposes to get a slice of data that isn't provided or readily accessible inside of the published application, or purely for curiosity. So over time, this is going to build up such that there are hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe tens of thousands of sheets that are unused by your users. For performance reasons or potentially for general tidiness, you may want to clean these up. At a lower volume, you can do this manually inside of the hub, but at scale, you'll likely want to take a programmatic approach to this. We'll want to verify a couple of prerequisites that are required for this process. So this will leverage logging that was first introduced in Qlik Sense Enterprise, February 2019. So if you are on that version or newer, you should be good to go. This process will use a PowerShell script, which will make the repository API calls to tag these sheets, so we can sort of qualify what they are and then potentially remove them down the road. That PowerShell script is going to depend on a couple of modules: Qlik CLI, that's the helper function for the repository calls, and import Excel, which will be used to parse the Excel file, which we'll build out. We will also use Node.js to be able to issue the engine API calls. These are simply the analogs of what would happen in the hub, but done programmatically behind the scenes. We will qualify the sheets that we want to remove. We will use the operations monitor for that. We will then use the PowerShell script to tag the sheets. You will want to notify the users that these sheets will be removed if they don't use these sheets within the next week, 2 weeks. It's not uncommon to email them 2 weeks out from removal to inform them, let them access the sheets, double check again a week out, and remind them, and then when the final time comes, just actually remove the sheets. And then we'll go over how to actually remove the sheets using the Node.js script. So let's just go ahead and jump over to a Qlik server. So let's verify the prerequisites. Inside of the QMC, we will go to engines. We will edit any of the available engines. There's just one in this site, but you may have multiple. And let's verify that the audit activity log level is set to basic. This is the default setting, so it's likely on in your environment, but if it's not, then you'll need to increase this to basic and allow a little bit of time to pass such that you can get usage data. As we mentioned before, we'll depend on some PowerShell libraries. So let's go ahead and go to PowerShell. I'm using a command prompt because I'm going to go back to it after we're done here. So let's use the get installed module command to see whether Qlik CLI is installed, and it should be. If it's not installed for you, you'll likely want to install it. We'll include some documentation on how to do so, and do the same for import Excel. We're done here. Let's go ahead and go back to the command prompt, and let's verify that Node.js is installed with node-v and npm-v. So we're good to go here. So let's exit out. Inside of the hub, we'll go ahead and go to the operations monitor, which will surface this data in an interactive way so that we can do the drill downs that we need. We'll go ahead and go to the sheet usage sheet, and there's a bunch of information here, but we're mostly interested for this activity inside of this detailed table here, which we'll expand for ease. Let's go ahead and focus on published apps. So we are selecting this sort of fake stream called unpublished, and we will select alternative from there. We're interested in private sheets for this activity, so let's make that selection, and let's look at the ones that have not been used in greater than 90 days. We can see here we've got some sheets that are quite old, that haven't been accessed in quite some time. From here, after we've done the necessary qualifying, we can export to Excel, and let's go ahead and move this file after we rename it to something more friendly, to a temporary directory here. So on the article, we have a copy of a script to tag these sheets. So this tagging will be used later for the actual removal, and in the short term, it just allows you some insight into what is going on in the QMC. So let's go ahead and put this into a text editor, and let's save this in our temp directory as sheet tag.ps1. And let's scroll to the top because there are some params which we'll need to adjust. For the computer name, we'll want to put the name of the Qlik server. In this case, we're running it on the Qlik server, so localhost is sufficient. For virtual proxy prefix, the virtual proxy which has Windows authentication has no prefix in this environment. That's the standard, so we'll go ahead and remove this value. For the input path, we'll point to that Excel file which we staged previously, so ctemp and sheets.xlsx. For the sheet ID column number, we'll leave as default, but what that is referring to is inside of this table, the ID value is the 9th column, which is how it is by default. The tag name is the tag which we'll be using to tag the sheets, and let's go ahead and confirm that that's actually created in the QMC before we run this script. And we'll see here that it actually already exists. So let's just delete it and create it again for demo purposes. Let's go ahead and adjust the out file path to our temp directory. This is just where some logging will go, and we should be good to go ahead and execute this script. So again, let's run command and go to PowerShell. You can go to PowerShell directly, but we're just going to go through the command prompt. We'll go to the temp directory, and we will run the sheet tag ps1 file. And this will run, and it should give us a bunch of sheets which we have tagged. Again, these are the ones that we qualified in the operations monitor. And if we go into app objects, and this will take a second to render because there are 17,000 sheets in this environment, we'll see that we have a bunch of sheets across the applications that were previously qualified over here. Some of these, you can see the executive dashboard, Sense Governance, all of the apps are shown here. So at this point, you as an administrator will want to notify the users. Email them, say, these sheets are going to be removed, please view them in the next week, or 2 weeks rather, and then a week out, email them again, remind them, and then let's sort of fast forward and pretend that we are now 2 weeks after our initial notification, and we actually want to remove things. Let's go ahead and go down to the next section. Again, this is going to be the steps that are required to run the actual engine API calls. And let's go ahead and grab the files which we'll need. So the package.json file, that is a file which will define the underlying modules which we'll want to use here. And if we go back and grab the remove tag private sheets file, this is the actual JavaScript code that will be used to remove the sheets. And let's save as remove sheets.js. Let's go ahead and scroll to the top, and we'll see here we'll want to define our host. Again, we're running this on the Qlik server itself, so localhost will be fine. If you are running this off the server, you'll want to specify the host name of the Qlik server. We will need to define the tag that we are using. In this case, we are using unused private sheet. And let's put it over here. For on line 12, we'll define where the certificates live. So this is, again, this makes sense on a Qlik Sense server. These are an exported copy of certificates. If you're off the server, you'll adjust this to your path. But this raises a good point that if you're running this on the Qlik server, you should ensure that when you as a user go to this path, program data Qlik Sense repository, exported certificates, you don't get this UAC prompt. So since we do, we will go ahead and go through the process of adding explicit rights to the user which we're running this process as. And let's select a principal. Vagrant is our username. We'll give it full control, and we will replace all child permissions as well because we want to have full access. So we see here we can now go in without a prompt, and at this point we should be good to go ahead and execute the script. So to do so, we will change to our temp directory, and we will first do an npm install command. This is going to use the package.json file and create, or download rather, the modules which we'll use. We'll see here we now have a node modules folder that's created. And so let's go ahead and remove the sheets. So remove sheets.js is the name of the file which we've created. We've given it just a shorter name than the example from GitHub. And if we run this, we should see, after a bit of work, that we now have a log and output file. And if we were to open this, we'd see that we've got some transactional logging about we're connecting to an application and we're removing a sheet with an ID. We also have an output file which tells us which app ID and sheet ID were removed. This is just ideal for auditing purposes. But if we go back into the QMC, we can now see that those previous sheets that had the unused private sheet tag have now been removed. So at this point we are good to go, and we've cleaned up our environment. This process typically would be done on an intermittent basis, potentially quarterly, maybe monthly, depending on the environment. We would generally recommend that the first time you go through this, you have a bit of time to go through this process because it is a bit laborious. It was fairly quick for this demo purpose, but we only had 6 sheets to remove. This may take a bit longer in your environment to do the process of removing things, but otherwise you should be good to be able to clean up your environment. And again, this is the cleanest approach at scale to be able to do this cleanup process.